What do you see when you imagine the future? When we picture what's to come, we often think of innovations that take us to new heights. Some of them are already here, and every day, thousands more make the jump from our imagination into reality. Nowhere is this more evident than here in Japan. Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies are fundamentally transforming the way we do things. All this is happening so fast, and we must do more than just keep up. These emerging technologies open up boundless possibilities of what our future could look like. Technology is not a simple solution to our problems. It poses questions that we need to answer and guidelines we need to write together. That's why we're all here, a global event hosted by Japan that brings together the world's leading voices across disciplines and geographies. How technology will shape our tomorrow depends on the choices we make today, and that starts now.
Hello everyone, my name is Arjun Kaplan. I'm a senior technology correspondent at CNBC based in Guangzhou, China. Welcome to everyone watching around the world. This session is called Digital Payments, Realizing the Vision. Now, we all know that COVID-19 has really accelerated some of those digital trends we've been talking about over the past few years, and one of those is digital payments. And I'm sat here in China where digital payments are everywhere, but how do they work cross-border? How can they drive financial inclusion? And what are some of the challenges that remain in the space? These are the questions I want to tackle with our fantastic panel today. And for those of you watching, wherever you are, if you have any questions for our panelists, please write them via the chat function and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Now, to bring in my fantastic panel, I just would like to introduce them. Firstly, Mr. Ryoza Himino, the Commissioner of the Financial Services Agency of Japan, Ms. Irina Hoffman, the CEO of IDB Lab, Demetrios Morantis, Head of Global Government Engagement at Visa, and Professor Longchen, Director of the Luohan Academy. Now, just would like to kick off the conversation talking about digital payments and what some of the challenges and solutions are. Now, Irina, I'd like to kick off with you because in a conversation we had before, you said that there's a digital emergency as it relates to access to finance. So what did you mean by that? What are the challenges that need to be overcome to solve it?
Well, thank you so much, Arjun, and thank you to the colleagues at the web for this invitation. By digital emergency, what we see is that, of course, as everywhere else in the world, in Latin America and the Caribbean, in parallel with the massive loss of GDP, like close to 8% of loss of GDP, 26 million jobs lost, there has also been a big acceleration of digital models and digital forms of doing things, from education to health to payments. And that started primarily because a lot of the population from the beginning of the pandemic in many of the countries, 14 to be precise of the 26 countries in Latin America, offer cash transfers to its citizens, 14 of those countries using digital payment modes. And so all of a sudden you had 50 new people in Brazil, 5 million people more in Colombia that for the first time in their lives had a bank account, and it was a digital account. So we want to take advantage of that to go from that to a much more fully inclusive financial model that is not just a one-off cash transfer. So there's a massive opportunity, but it has to come with a bundle of measures, and that go from connectivity, interoperability, and adding many more services than just this one-off cash transfer.
And on that point, Demetrios, I'll come to you because Irene there mentioned interoperability. It's a point that you've been focused on. First, help us quickly understand what exactly that means and what the challenges and potential solutions are for that.
Thank you, Arjun. And thanks to WEF and the government of Japan for putting this on. I wish we were all there in Tokyo instead of being beamed in. Look, Irena said it perfectly. When we think about digital payments and we think about electronic commerce, we have to put it into the context, which is it's really a flywheel for economic empowerment. Digital payments, cross-border e-commerce is enabling small businesses that have never been able to participate in global commerce now suddenly to see new opportunities all over the world. There's been a 19% growth in global e-commerce between 2019 and 2020. And the pandemic has just only underscored the importance of being able to be digital for small businesses. Those that have had digital connectivity have been the ones that are the most able to recover from the ravages of the pandemic. Those who have not have had the most challenge. And so being digitally enabled, being able to accept digital payments, being connected to a digital financial ecosystem is really become more and more critical. Where does interoperability come in? In order to make the digital ecosystem flourish, things need to be interoperable. You can't live in a world where there's, one standard, one system, one payment scheme, one network. You need to be able to interoperate with everyone. And so when I think about interoperability, I think of it as being something that's applicable to networks, something that's applicable to standards, and something that's applicable to regulations. And if we can create an interoperable ecosystem that allows, 1,000 flowers to bloom, you're just providing more opportunities for small businesses and others that can really see and rely on a digital ecosystem for their economic recovery, for their economic empowerment, and for their economic success.
Thanks, Dimitros and Irina, for laying that out, because these are topics definitely want to dig into a bit further around regulation, in particular, and some of the technologies around that. But first, let me just come to Professor Longchen first, because you've had the experience in China, Ant Group with Alipay, one of the biggest mobile and digital payments providers in China. What do you see Chinese market you think that could work around the world when it comes to addressing some of these challenges and issues?
Firstly, I would like to talk about some of the values of digital payment as we see from China's experience. So I think that firstly, it means unprecedented opportunities. In a typical e-commerce platform in China, now you have hundreds of millions of consumers online to do shopping, and you have tens of millions of SMEs that can serve them. So now a small store, it used to be restricted by the space and time. Now they can serve customers thousands of kilometers away. The average distance between the buyers and sellers is about 1,000 kilometers in China. And so that means unprecedented opportunities for SMEs that were only available to big companies before. I think the second thing you can see is that digital payment, it means the information of real economic activity that could be observed and recorded. That means the KYC, know your customer. It helps the merchants to serve the customers well. It also means that the customers can get financial services. So as one example, in the past several years, my bank has served more than 20 million SMEs. Half of the entrepreneurs are women, and they use this so-called 310 exam model. It takes 3 minutes to apply, 1 second to get the funding, and 0 personnel interference. Using my friend, Nobel Prize winner, Ben Holmstrom's words, information is the new collateral, and digital payment is a powerful tool to supply that. Now, let me give you a third example to see the value of the digital payment. It is that it could be a very powerful tool to promote sustainability, green finance. We'll use one example from Alipay. So in Alipay, actually, we have this tool is called the Ant Forest. So essentially, every day, when the users they involve into the carbon reduction activities, it could be recorded. It's upon their approval. It could be traced and recorded, and they're going to see a little green energy. If they collect the energy, or they can collect it from each other, from their friends, a little green tree will grow on Alipay's platform. And then this, if this virtual tree grows into full, the real tree will be planted in the desertification areas in China. So in the past several years, actually more than 550 million users have adopted this program, and more than 220 million real trees were planted, and more than 12 million tons of the carbons were reducted. So my point here is to use this example to show that payment means unprecedented opportunity and inclusion. It also means that it is a powerful tool because it means connectivity and information. It also means availability of inclusive finance, and for a lot of additional innovations, including the sustainability. So that's some of the things we learned from China. But I think one key thing here is that we need to have the public and private collaboration to do this. Domestically, I think that it is very important for the governments to have the right environment to help to promote the infrastructure for digital facilities. And it also has the right encouraging environment for the policy. And then in the meantime, it allows the market participants to transform the real economic activities into the using the digital payment. Internationally, I really support Dimitri's point that we need a lot of the interoperability. Let me stop here.
And yeah, we'll dig into that a little bit more. Well, I want to get the view from sort of the country level with Commissioner Amino for a moment. Talking about digital payments in Japan, how is the FSA and the broader government thinking about digital payments in Japan? Because Japanese consumers are still very heavily reliant on cash. So what is the strategy to push forward with digital payments?
We've been changing the regulatory environment. For example, last year, we introduced new 3 categories for non-bank payment services providers so that the regulatory requirement would be proportionate to the risk they entail. So we are amending our regulation all the time to facilitate the transition into digital payment. The latest news is that the Bank of Japan has entered into the proof of concept stage in their central bank digital currency project. And more broadly, the government would establish a new agency which would coordinate throughout the government to transform the whole society to make the digitalization and transformation. And that would create a further better environment to move forward with digital payment. That is our current situation. And as Dimitrius mentioned, with regard to digital payments, there are 100 flowers blossoming, but also there is a move toward higher interoperability. For example, for small amount payment, there is a plan to create a single layer of common infrastructure and another layer of individual payment services, and to connect them, the 2 layers with APIs to attain competition among diverse models of payment. At the same time, attain interoperability. The framework will be in operation next year. So many things going on to move toward digitalized payment.
Right. Let's dig into then. We've been talking about public-private partnerships. We've been talking about interoperability. So let me just go back to Irene. What areas can public and private sectors work together on? And what would you like to see from policymakers when it comes to the regulatory point of view?
Thanks. That's a great question. Well, first of all, is for both to recognize the opportunity, and we see that, like in other regions, Latin America and the Caribbean, this is at least a $200 billion opportunity in front of us. We've seen that the highest growth in investment in the last 12 months have been in companies that are in the digital payment space. They've attracted more than $4 billion. And you have companies in the region, not just the e-commerce companies that have, of course, grown tremendously, like Mercado Libre in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a $75 billion company now, is the largest market cap company in the region, but also in the payment space. Companies from a market as small as Uruguay, 3.4 million people, like DLocal is the latest unicorn in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I think first and foremost is to realize that there is a massive opportunity. And then very much like Jimeno-san said, making sure that we build the right foundations, because what we don't want is to transfer the inequalities of the physical world into the digital world. And so we're very focused on that from the Inter-American Development Bank, and within that IDB Lab as the innovation laboratory, with the function of really making sure that we create a public good. In this case, what we've done is leveraging blockchain through a platform called LagChain that provides that layer that basically offers a free common protocol on top of which anyone can then layer use cases. In fact, we've done some with WEF related to customs, but many related also to digital wallets, having the essentials in terms of self-sovereign digital identity, and being able to load credentials and giving people the chance to really build their own economic passport. And as Professor Chen mentioned, use the great tool that digital payments provide in terms of being able to record and trace economic activity that can then be used to access many more services. So I'd like to stop there, but I think the building this type of partnerships, building this type of platforms, like the example that we have now in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is LagChain, it's an amazing new form of public-private partnership, and I invite anyone who is interested in learning more to contact us.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I wonder if that's a model as well. And as you see it, obviously you're focused on a specific region of the world, but is that a model you see perhaps being able to work in other areas of the world?
Definitely. In fact, even the World Bank and even with the African Development Bank, they are leveraging it, because in the end, this is precisely built as an agnostic platform that can be interoperable and open to anybody who wants to build use cases on it. It's been recognized by ITU as one of the leading blockchain ecosystems in the world. And so absolutely, we built it with a public good mentality. It's there, and now we are seeing 30 of the leading partners around the world, each with their own strength in bond issuances, in AML and KYC, which Professor Chen mentioned before. Adding that onto that ecosystem, and it can definitely be cross-border and enable also cross-border payment with Citibank, for example, with whom we've already done a number of use cases on that, including for our own payments across countries at the IDB.
And Demetrius, for you, I mean, you work, of course, and are in constant communication with governments. From a regulatory standpoint, what needs to change? And also, when you're speaking to these governments, how are they thinking about private and public partnerships in the digital payment space?
There's such an amazing opportunity right now for governments and the private sector to work together to really enable this in a way that's never been done before. Commissioner Jimeno is leading really important work in the context of the Financial Stability Board, where they're looking at how to make cross-border payments, faster, cheaper, more interoperable. And that work is critically important. But I think the things that governments should focus on, there are a number of things. One is, and this is fundamental, is to remove barriers to cross-border e-commerce. We're in, unfortunately, an era of economic nationalism, and in the digital sphere, that's translating into things like data localization policies. That's super harmful to cross-border e-commerce. It's super harmful to the ability of small businesses, which are the backbone of every single nation's national economy, to be able to start, run, grow, and thrive. And so governments really need to lead the way in, whether it's through trade policy or otherwise, in concluding agreements that remove barriers to cross-border payments. Japan has been a real leader in this respect during its G20 year, when it worked and was really pushing the Data Free Flow with Trust initiative. In the Asia Pacific, Singapore and Australia have concluded a really just groundbreaking digital economy agreement that does a number of things like prohibit data localization, encourage interoperability. Chile has been a real leader in this space in the Pacific Alliance. So there are a lot of great initiatives underway that really we just need to push. So that's sort of at the macro government level. Then there's some more sort of micro specific things that could be helpful. And these are things that are part of Himino-san's agenda, I believe, which is, how do you reduce regulatory complexity? There's a lot of regulatory requirements that are just very complicated, and it's hard enough for a bank or a company like Visa to deal with. But imagine if you're a small business and you're trying to have to contend with the panoply of AML requirements around the world. The more simple, the more rational we make those, the more we'll able to promote e-commerce and digital payments. Likewise, on the licensing side, this is a real challenge, particularly for remittances. Singapore and Malaysia are doing a great job, trying to really streamline licensing procedures in their remittances corridor. And then I think governments, oftentimes there's a lot of regulatory fragmentation, and the more that they can coordinate data policies with each other, the better. We've recently come out in favor of creating an FSB-like entity under the G7 called the Data and Technology Forum, which would allow, leader-level conversations on these very topics, so that governments can move forward on these and coordinate in ways that would allow the innovation in the private sector. And that's the private sector's role in the public-private partnership. We've got to innovate. We've got to create the products and services that are going to help small businesses, that are going to help consumers, that are going to help promote financial inclusion. We have a product at Visa called Visa Direct that completed 3.5 billion transactions in 2020. But that was involving 16 card-based networks, 65 domestic ACH schemes, 7 faster payment schemes, and 5 payment gateways. That's interoperability. And if we can foster that through a private-public partnership, we're going to really make a huge headway in the goal that we are talking about today, which is, how do you use digital trade, digital payments, cross-border e-commerce to help empower small businesses, consumers, and those who need to be empowered.
And Commissioner Himino, Demetrios mentioned Japan from a regulatory standpoint. And what are some of the regulations you're trying to enact around digital payments? And I mean, for your challenge is also balancing regulation with, of course, innovation and promoting innovation.
Thank you. Since Demetrios mentioned the global effort, let me briefly talk about that as well. And under the Saudi Arabian G20 presidency, the major achievement is that regulators, central bankers, and the finance ministries around the world committed to attain a faster, cheaper, more transparent, and more inclusive cross-border payment and came up with a specific roadmap with 5 areas and 19 building blocks. And we are implementing it, and it covers the elements Dimitrios mentioned. For example, we need to address cross-border regulatory fragmentation, and we are reviewing the existing international standards and trying to identify any gaps or areas for further alignment. Data is also an important area. Dimitrios mentioned the data free flow with trust. We are also, FSP is also reviewing the regulation together with data authorities related to cross-border data flows. We are also talking about the harmonization of money laundering rules and the possibility of shared customer due diligence infrastructures. So in many areas, the work is proceeding. It's not easy, it's an ambitious project, but regulators around the world is working at full speed under the roadmap. And Arjun, you mentioned what kind of regulatory challenges Japan faces with payment innovation and how we are trying to deal with it. I suppose the issue is issues are broadly common across the world, and let me cite 3 challenges. One is the need for agility. JFSA is submitting bills to amend relevant laws almost every year. That is the first challenge for regulators. The second challenge is to how to define regulatory perimeter. People talk about the need about the activity-based regulation or argue for the principle of same activity, same risk, same regulation. It's good, but nobody knows how to do it in specific design of regulation. We need to think about that. And the third one is the issue Japan raised when we were the G20 presidency in 2019. How to deal with permissionless distributed financial technologies. Regulators attained regulatory purpose so far, mainly designating entities to regulate. But if there is no central entity masterminding the whole picture, like in the case of Bitcoin, how to design mechanism to attain public purposes. Maybe we need to build some brand new approaches like multi-stakeholder approach as we do in the case of internet. That one is another major area we need to tackle on.
Interesting. And Professor Chen, from your perspective, I mean, China's been going through a big regulatory push over the past few months regarding the fintech space, around lending, around payments, and various other areas as well. So, I mean, what kind of regulation do you feel will be helpful in being able to push innovation in the digital payment space?
China has been a tremendous beneficiary of the central bank's leadership. So just give you a concrete example. So back in 2004, Alipay was born, but with other third-party non-bank payment institutions. But really, it's only after 6 more years then the central bank started to have the formal regulation rules. Before that, there's a lot of the guidance. It's called market guidance, but really it allows this to flourish. So the result, the end result is really tremendous. I cannot emphasize this enough because it allows for China to transform into a country with more than 1 billion mobile payment users. So what we have learned from this is that I think the government needs to provide the the digital infrastructure and the policy environment, encouraging policy environment in the meantime, because there's a lot of resistance from both the supply and demand side to adopt the new digital payment methods. So for that, I think it's very important to allow the market participant to experiment, to come up with novel solutions to the economic problems that was there before. Another point here is that I think is if we think about how to solve the problems of finance, there are a couple of problems. One is the information itself. So how do you have the information, have it digitized at very little cost such that then you can do the payment, you can do the inclusive finance. Another part is the trustworthy information. So the information is not trapped by one body. And that is a part the blockchain can help to resolve a lot. So from our experience, I think a lot can be done just by having the information digitized, having everybody participate in the marketplace. I really share the enthusiasm from the previous speakers that we should really push for the interoperability and the cross-border e-commerce, because that really helps, especially the SMEs, the average users. From China's experience, the most active users are not the most wealthy people or the biggest companies. Really, they are the SMEs, the average Joes. They really enjoy this thanks to the very little, close to zero cost of the creating and sharing information.
All right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to sort of focus this last part of the chat on technology and technology solutions that could perhaps help us solve some of these problems that we've discussed so far. So Irene, I'll kick off with you. And what are some of the technologies you see helping to boost financial inclusion, to solve some of these issues around interoperability, for example? Is digital currency something you're interested in? And of course, already you mentioned sort of blockchain-based technologies as well. How do you see it?
I will talk about technology, but from the point of view of what is it for and why, and not we at IDB Lab tend to promote new technologies, but always with a focus on who we're trying to help. And what we've seen is again understanding very, very well what problems we're trying to solve. Still, more than half of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean is unbanked. 20% of the consumers still pay for e-commerce purchases in cash. And so how do you, at the same time, we've seen in the last few months how quickly also habits can change. This is probably the biggest lesson of 2020, is that those habits can change if usability is obvious. And social payments, the social transfer payments I mentioned earlier, e-commerce are just two examples to illustrate it. Now, so that's the trend, and there's still a massive opportunity and gap to be filled. In terms of how and which technologies can be the most useful for it, I think those that promote payment infrastructures that are interoperable, a system that promotes open source, where at the moment, there's no single regional settlement mechanism across national clearinghouses. The interoperability is taking place, as the Metros rightly said, across systems like Visa, MasterCard for retail use. But what we want to see is also fintech and traditional players, which could be great enablers of global services, integrating their own infrastructures to enable digital payments, building channels across countries. And because in this case, fragmentation is a real barrier, and this is, of course, an advantage that China had as a massive market without that kind of barrier. we need to look for technologies that can more easily be deployed in an efficient and low-cost way and with the user in mind. And one of them, as I mentioned, is indeed blockchain. In terms of the infrastructure and open infrastructure we've built, the next layer is indeed digital fiat currency. We are not going into cryptocurrencies per se, even though 5 of the 10 countries in the world that use most cryptocurrencies are in Latin America and the Caribbean, and that's not even including Venezuela. But even if we are looking at it more from the perspective of a digital fiat currency that is integrated in the formal financial system.
Great, and you mentioned digital fiat currencies there, so I'll just come on to Commissioner Himino, because you said earlier, of course, the Japanese government's working on a digital Japanese currency. So just lay out the reasons for this, any timeline you could give us as well. And just on that point, do you see other digital currencies like Bitcoin being able to coexist alongside a central bank issued digital currency?
Thank you, Arjun-san. Of course, the Bank of Japan has started an experiment, but so far as I understand, there is no decision or judgment whether it should be used in live or not. It is still the stage of weighing the benefits and the potential side effects. Well, I'm sure that the future payment would be largely digitized, but how much will the digital be? I have no specific views. One big benefit of blockchain-based digital currency is that it can be programmable and work with smart contracts. So, well, if that potential is utilized, combining financial and non-financial transaction and payment together, that would create a major opportunity to transform the economy and society. And if that happens, maybe blockchain-based digital currency could be a key central form of currency in the future. But many ideas behind Bitcoin is valuable. I very much appreciate the dream presented by Satoshi Nakamoto. But, well, I see no connection between the current big market capitalization. Maybe it is just consuming CO2 to support speculative activities, but I'm sure there will be second and third and fourth generation of digital currencies, and I very much see major potential in that direction. Thank you.
Right, and we've just got a question in from the audience, and I want to address this one to Professor Chen, because the audience member is asking about the launch of the digital yuan in China, or at least the pilot projects so far, and its implications on the future of digital payments, especially, as I think was previously mentioned by Demetrius, in an area where you've got a bit of economic nationalism to some extent, data siloing, and some of these other issues as well.
To do finance well, I think, as I mentioned, we need both information and trustworthy information. So for information, if you have the information, then you can do the KYC, you can provide the digital service and the financial service, including the lending, those other stuff. So the second part is the trustworthy part. That is then that part, there are two ways to do it. One is a permission, which means it's the permission blockchain, which means that the information is shared by the a number of institutions, and that can spread the trust. So you do not need to collect information every time, and then finally you have the permissionless. So as just been mentioned, that the one big problem of the permissionless blockchain is that activity has very little connection to the real economy right now. So a huge chunk of the real economy is try to make it needs to have the information to be digitized and to such that the financial service is possible. So that there's several ways to serve my point here is that there are several ways to serve to make the financial service available. Now, countries are trying to explore the digital, the fiat digital currencies. I think for that, it has good reasons to do that because it tries to track the economic activity better than it helps, I think, help the monetary policy. It helps to a lot of the stuff, the policy side of the work can be done better. What we have experienced from before then, I think, is that the market-driven agents, with or without the government, digital currencies have already done a tremendous job by promoting the financial inclusion in China, in other parts of the world. I think the government they also needs the currency to be digitized because everybody wants to do this. That will help the digitization, the financial inclusion to be better, but it's not a 0-1 exclusion. It's really, again, it comes down to collaboration between the market and the governments to help the financial service to be more inclusive. Yeah.
And Demetrius, just from your point of view, when you look at the talk at the moment from central banks around digital currencies, how does that fit into your world? And do you see that being able to solve some of these issues around interoperability or around the uptake of digital payments as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think Professor Long just brought up a really important point that we haven't really talked a ton about, which is trust. And, you know, at the bottom of everything we're talking about with respect to digital payments is trust, and trust comes from making sure that systems are secure and resilient. And that's something, you know, that we have decades of experience on it at Visa. And that's where, you know, this whole idea of Visa and as a network of networks and the whole concept of interoperability comes in. You know, blockchain is another network. It's another form factor. It's like ACH. It's like real-time payments. It's like VisaNet. And if we're able to ensure interoperability amongst all of these different form factors in a way that's secure and resilient, that's how we are best able to ensure financial inclusion. And so with respect to, you know, central bank digital currencies or stable coins, I mean, it's something that's really important to us at Visa. We've been working with central banks across the globe as they think about their own manifestation of a central bank digital currency to really help, you know, shape the thinking and shape how that plays out. Likewise, we've been working with, you know, players across the ecosystem on how to, you know, realize stable coins, and how do you know, include them in wallets? How do you allow consumers to purchase stable coins? So there's so much going on that's so exciting in this space right now. And, you know, at bottom, we just need to make sure that whatever we do ensures that we maintain a secure and resilient financial ecosystem that promotes financial inclusion, you know, and allows, as I said earlier in my remarks, 1,000 flowers to bloom.
Absolutely. Demetrius, thank you so much for that. And I think I certainly learned a lot during the course of this chat, and I hope everyone watching it as well, I think it's clear that digital payments are very critical for economic growth, for financial inclusions, and lots more advantages to them. But there are some challenges that do remain around things like interoperability, around regulation. But of course, as we've been discussing, lots of technologies coming to the fore, lots of discussions being had on the governmental level to solve some of these things. So certainly an exciting future ahead for this digital payment space, and of course, realizing the vision. I'd just like to thank our wonderful panelists for their thoughts and ideas around this topic. I'm Arjun Kapil from CNBC, and now I'd just like to hand over to Sean Doherty, Head of International Trade and Investment at the World Economic Forum, to give some closing remarks. Over to you, Sean.
Great. Thank you very much, Arjun. And on behalf of the World Economic Forum, I'd just like to add my thanks to you and all the panelists for really a great conversation. The forum community is working to drive forward public and private cooperation on digital payment. And I think today's discussion has really been a great way to kick off our 2021 focus on interoperability, regulatory reform, and harmonization. So we would very much welcome broad participation, try and help build a more inclusive payments ecosystem. And so I'd encourage the audience to get in touch with our trade team at digitaltrade@weforum.org. But again, thanks to our moderator and our panelists, and please do enjoy the rest of the Global Technology Governance Summit. Thanks all.